Welcome to Pennsylvania Newsmakers, and as always, thanks for watching. Well, let's take a look at the economy this year and what might happen next year. But first, the big issues in education, redistricting, and the governor's race, as they say, let's get to it.
Welcome to the fast-paced and unrehearsed weekly discussion featuring the leaders who help shape your world. Join us as we address the issues that impact you each and every day. This is Pennsylvania Newsmakers. And now, here's your host, Terry Madonna.
Well, it's an issue-oriented show, and joining me to talk about the first of the major issues we're going to chat about is Jan Murphy. She's the Capitol reporter at PennLive, Patriot News. Jan, welcome back. It's always great to have you.
Thank you, Terry.
Well, you're the expert on education. You write about it frequently. And I'll tell you, the one thing that at the beginning of the year we couldn't have expected, school mask, along with vaccinations, right? What a big debate. Give us a summary of it.
Well, it started off, remember, we were coming off a year last year where some schools didn't even have any in-person instruction, and educators realized that was really doing students a disservice, and so the focus was this school year, let's get the kids back in school in person. And so it started with, in July, the governor said to school districts, I'm not going to mandate anything, you make your own decision. Well, as the school year approached, he realized most of the schools have said they are going to leave masks as optional to the parents, and then he asked the legislature to come back and say, let's issue a statewide mandate, and they refused. And so the acting health secretary went ahead and on the last day of August and issued a mask mandate. And so that caused such division in school districts between parents and educators and administrators and school boards, and I mean, it made for some rancorous school board meetings.
Oh yeah, that's a great point. And it seemed to me the difference was, should the state do it or should it be left to the school boards? School boards, if they said you've got to wear a mask, that's one thing, but if the state required it, that was an entirely different thing. Am I right about that?
You're absolutely right, and I mean, it was just too much of an infringement on for some parents for their individual rights, and teachers, too, the school staff, they felt a little bit, not a little bit, some of them felt very unsafe having the kids, not being required to wear masks. So many of them were appreciative of the statewide mandate. But then comes December, and of course there was a court challenge. Senator Corman led that along with Representative Topper and some school officials, and they challenged the health secretary's authority to issue the mask mandate.
All right, let's go to school funding.
Okay.
There was an increase in funding this year. I mean, if there's one issue that's endemic that every year comes up year after year, is school funding. Take it.
Well, yeah, and right now we have a major lawsuit playing out in Commonwealth Court over school funding, and you can expect in the new year there will be a decision as to whether or not the state has been underfunding school districts, and depending on which way they go, I mean, it could mean a massive increase in the need for state funding for education. But this trial is exposing the inequities that exist across the state with...
in other words, some school districts are better able to handle the money they get than other school districts that have greater problems. Is that the point?
Right. It's, I mean, like Lancaster School District, they're one of the parties in the lawsuit, and they said about students coming in with, issues from home that just carry over into the school, and they need counselors there, but they can't afford counselors to help the kids with it. So there's, it's not only just academics and school resources, but it's personnel that a lot of schools are being shortchanged and they just can't afford.
We have about a minute left, and I have to ask you about the state system of higher ed, the 14 publicly owned universities. 6 of them are being combined, I guess is one way to put it, and that seems to go on and on and on, as well as funding.
Well, yeah, I think that you're going to, this is the year where we're going to see the state system combine those 6 universities into 2. and we'll see how that goes. I mean, there's a lot of work to make that happen, and also the accreditation is hanging out there, and that's a big concern. But at the same time, in the Capitol, there's a push to there seems to be a recognition that the state owns the state system, that they are the state's universities, and they need to be funded.
So you're going to have a lot to do next year.
Oh my gosh, yeah,
there's
higher ed, basic ed, all across the board.
There you go. All right, when we come back, we're going to talk about redistricting. Yes, the state legislature, all the districts are going to be redrawn. They have been redrawn. We'll see where all that goes. And then we have something called a governor's race that's huge. It's going to be covered nationally, and we'll get to that after these words.
This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is presented by the Pennsylvania Chamber of Business and Industry, the statewide voice of business, and by the Pennsylvania State Education Association, bringing the power of a great education to our schools, our students, and our communities. This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is brought to you by the Pennsylvania Highway Information Association, the go-to source to learn about transportation projects and issues. Please visit pahighwayinfo.org. And by the Pennsylvania Manufacturers Association. Business in Pennsylvania is our business.
Well, Sarah Anne Hughes joins me. She's the Spotlight Pennsylvania's deputy editor, and we have a number of important topics to talk about. I'll tell you, Sarah Anne, we have one of the biggest and probably will be one of the most covered governor's race in the nation. They're going to pour in and watch as Governor Wolf is term limited. He will end with 2 terms. That's it. He's done, and we'll have to see. But when you take the list of people running, I can't repeat all the names without the list in front of me. Am I off on that or no?
You're not off on that. I too have a list. So for Democrats, it's pretty easy, right?
Oh yeah.
It's a field of one.
Explain it to the people.
We have the Attorney General, Josh Shapiro, who is looking pretty much like he is not going to be contested for the Democratic spot next year. Republicans is a completely different story. My count is 14 at the moment, although 14. That could absolutely change by the time this airs. Big names in the race still coming in: Lou Barletta, Jake Corman, the president of the Senate, Scott Martin, state senator from Lancaster, just came in. And there are still people waiting in the wings, probably most notably Doug Mastriano, a state senator from central Pennsylvania.
And a big Trump supporter.
Big Trump supporter, was sort of front and center with pushing conspiracy theories about voter fraud.
Widespread fraud, to use the expression that President Trump used.
Correct,
right?
of which there is absolutely no evidence of that occurring in Pennsylvania. But that is how he's made his name. He also was very, very strongly in favor of no mask mandates and reopening schools. And he said very recently that he's raised enough money that he is going to jump into the race. So we're just waiting for a formal announcement from him.
We'll have to see who. It's one thing to say you're running and to set up an exploratory committee. It's another thing to go out and file the petitions and do all of that and really get into the race. I'd be stunned if more than 6, 7, forget 13, 14, 15, whatever the final number will be. I don't know what you think.
I'm sure the power players would appreciate that, having the field narrowed. Because as you said, this is going to be a hugely watched governor's race, and there is going to be a tremendous amount of money flowing into it. And I know that the people who control that money right now are having conversations about, who do they pick, right? Do they go with Lou Barletta, the more establishment candidate who, is well known in Republican circles? Do they go with someone like Jake Corman, right? Yeah. Very well known, great fundraiser, very good at that. Or do they go with a Mastriano who has this populist base, but is, to say it lightly, a very controversial candidate?
Well, I want to talk more about it, but we're going to run out of time if I don't get to redistricting. The state legislature, our congressional delegation, all the maps are coming out now, and obviously some of them are probably going to end up in court, either one or both. You know that. So what's the latest on that?
Yeah, so the congressional map, that is much more in flux, right? The House Republicans picked a map drawn independently. Some of the Republicans did not like what it did to their area, and so they put forth another map and voted on it without any sort of public review. Right. So right now that's really up in the air. Governor Wolf has basically said he's not going to be part of the negotiating process for this. They'll send him a map and he'll say yes or no. If he says no, yeah, it's looking like
that's a congressional map.
Yes, that's the congressional map.
He has nothing to say. He has a lot to say maybe, but nothing to do in terms of the redistricting for the state legislature. 5-person commission does that.
Yes, that's right. So that's a separate process. The maps of that have been released. Democrats are pretty happy with the House map. It would, right now Republicans have 113 seats in the House. The new map would give them about 104 and give Democrats 99, right? So a much, much closer balance in the state House. Republicans, not very happy about that, are calling this a partisan gerrymander. Experts are saying, no, not so much. This is kind of just improving a map that has been biased towards Republican for many years. State Senate map, pretty similar, keeps the status quo towards Republicans.
All right, I want to thank you for coming in. The Republicans control both houses of the legislature. We can point that out, and we have a Democratic governor. All right, coming up, 2 of the top business leaders join me, and we're going to chat about the economy this year and where is it going to go. We'll find out after these words.
This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is brought to you by Cross-State Credit Union Association. Credit unions, where people are worth more than money. To find a credit union that is right for you, go to ibelong.org. And by the Energy Association of Pennsylvania, Pennsylvania's energy information source. This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is brought to you by the Association of Pennsylvania State College and University Faculties, representing the faculty and coaches who are devoted to providing quality public higher education for Pennsylvania's college students.
Well, one of the most important subjects we could possibly talk about is the economy, the status, the health of the economy. And we'll take a look, first of all, at the economy this year and then what could happen next year. Joining me to do that are 2 experts on business. Gene Barr, he's the president and CEO of the Pennsylvania Chamber of Business and Industry. And David Taylor, he's the president and CEO of the Pennsylvania Manufacturers Association. Well, David, let's start with you. It has been, I better be careful how I say it, quite a year. How's that? I'll say quite a year. Am I right about that?
Yes, sir.
All right. What's the big stories for the year if you were to write a summary?
Well, I mean, certainly I would say that the workforce crisis has intensified and that has really slowed down the economy, that you have businesses that can't staff up and that it restricts hours. It basically serves as a cap on economic growth. You've seen that manifest through dislocations in the supply chains that were short on basically every kind of staffer or employee who would do the work that needs to be done, including truckers.
Yeah. Gene, what I hear from a lot of business folks, and you represent a lot of them, is it's the staffing problem. It's not quite knowing when people are, the retail in particular, when they're going to come. Now this year, over the holiday season, looks great. I mean, every place I go, they seem to be packed. Is that the pent-up energy for the past year, you think?
There's some of that, and Dave's exactly right. The biggest thing that I hear out of our members, people across Pennsylvania, actually nationally, is this whole workforce issue. And it's due to a lot of them. There's been some national polling done, and there are still some people who won't come back because they're afraid of COVID. Understand that. There's a lot of people, though, who have kind of reoriented their thinking to say, you know what, if it's 2-income family, we can live on 1, or they say, I've still got enough saved up from unemployment comp and some of the federal programs that I'm still working off of that. and absolutely supply chain is an issue. There's no single one. But we had a problem with workforce going into the pandemic, and Dave appropriately notes it is now a crisis. When you have businesses that can't open or have cut hours or have cut menu items or you name it, we've got real issues here. And we've got to find a way to resolve these. We are working on it through the Governor's Workforce Command Center, but now, as noted, it is an absolute crisis.
Go ahead.
No, and I'd say also that the rise of inflation is a very serious concern for the economy, and one of the things driving that is rising energy prices. That energy is necessary for every step of production, including transportation, and so when those prices go up, there's a pancake effect that yields to higher prices for everything.
Yeah, the original explanation for the workforce problem was that they were getting aid from the federal government, but is that still out there? I hear that it's not, and people still are. How are people living if they're not working and they're not getting?
There's still some. Keep in mind, a lot of money was pushed out over the last 18 months, a lot of money, and some people have sat on it. We still have a lot of people who've acknowledged in polling that they're still working off some of that. Now, on the flip side, what has been good for workers to a large degree is wages are up significantly. But the problem is, as was noted, because inflation is such a problem, the increase in inflation has largely eaten away the increases in wages, which is why our organizations are, honestly, I don't want to speak for Dave, I'll speak for ours, so opposed to this massive spending that's being proposed in Washington. And to say that this is going to cure inflation by putting more money into the economy is kind of like saying, in order to, I had too much to drink, therefore, in order to get over it, I want to have another drink. It doesn't work that way.
Put out the fire with gasoline.
It doesn't work that way. And so, look, there are some proposals in there we can talk about, but pumping more money into this economy right now, more free money, is not going to help us. In fact, it'll have the opposite effect relative to inflation.
You're going to have to ask a guy named Manchin about the Build Back Better plan, right?
Yeah, he's not a big fan. He's not a big fan.
All right. We're going to run to a break. When we come back, let's chat about next year. We'll have our experts talk a little bit about what could happen next year with the emphasis on could happen. Back in a moment.
This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is brought to you by the Pennsylvania Medical Society. Inspired physicians committed to the good health of Pennsylvanians and the advancement of the practice of medicine.
All right, David, there's no doubt about it. Making predictions is not easy. Whether we're talking about the economy or politics, it's not easy.
Yes.
But everyone, of course, is asking about the economy, what's likely to happen based on what we've been through. Take it.
Well, I mean, obviously what happens depends upon the choices that our leaders make. But one of the really hopeful signs for Pennsylvania's future was the recent decision by a Texas company called Nacero to invest $6 billion in Luzerne County to create a new fuels facility that's going to take Pennsylvania natural gas and turn it into zero carbon emission automotive fuel. That this can go into cars as they currently are. The people don't have to change their vehicles. And this major investment was drawn down because of a production-based tax credit, the manufacturing resource tax credit, which was Act 66 of 2020. And so this is something that we were involved with. And again, it's all about the environment for investment. And we need to earn these investments. And so seeing a major project like this go in, I think, is a very hopeful sign for the future.
Gene, what will environmentalists say about this?
Well, look, there's a lot of environmentalists who unfortunately say, let's end fossil fuels right now. The reality is, as I saw a paper that was done the other day, actually doing that is, they've termed it inhumane because so many people need fossil fuels to survive. Dave has talked about that, and there needs to be a planned transition to what our future energy is. Again, to get into predictions, I don't know what that energy is. What would Yogi Berra say? It's hard to make predictions, especially about the future. So it could be hydrogen. It could be hydrogen from natural gas. We know we need natural gas as a feedstock for manufacturing anyway. So there's a lot of discussions about that. In terms of where we go for 22, supply chain issues are going to continue. Based on the people I'm talking to, they don't anticipate these to resolve themselves before 2023. So people should get used to that. They should get used. I'm afraid to inflation for some period of time. But what we need to do in this Commonwealth is to get ourselves squared away to where we get more of these type investments.
I've said this over and over and over again. A progressive governor, I use these terms, progressive, conservative, just descriptively. A guy named Tom Wolf, guess what? He's for fracking. A guy named Joe Biden, August a year ago, went out to southern Allegheny County, and you know what he said? I'm for fracking.
Well, and again, I wish that the president had followed through on those kinds of promises, because the things that his administration have done are the direct cause of higher energy prices that are leading to inflation. He shut down the Keystone XL pipeline. He yanked the permits to get oil in Alaska. He ended energy harvesting on federal lands. I mean, this administration has done a lot to constrict energy production domestically, and that is, I think, one of the big causes of our problems.
Well, it is, and we have a largely incoherent energy policy to the extent that this administration has had to go to Vladimir Putin and ask him to increase energy production. That should not happen. And we can't have those kinds of things happen in this country when we have the ability to do energy independence. We had it. And now, unfortunately, the signals being sent to the industry are, we're going to abolish your industry in 20 years, 10 years, whatever the number is. Who's going to want to put money into an industry when the federal government has said, we're going to make sure that you're gone in that period of time?
A guy named Jimmy Carter lost to Ronald Reagan largely because of what was then called stagflation,
right,
an economy that wasn't growing and
yes.
inflation. So is inflation perhaps the single most important economic problem?
Well, it's the economic problem that individual citizens feel most acutely. I mean, you can't spin people on what you are paying at the pump or how much money you have when you're sitting at the kitchen table to do monthly bills. You can't fool people on that because they see it directly. And as Gene was saying about how wages have gone up, but inflation's gone up more than that. So people know when they're falling behind economically.
Yeah.
And it's a hidden tax because it's on energy and it's on food and these things across the board. It hits the lower classes worse. It's a hidden tax on the working class and is tremendously unfair. Yeah. But it's not, and it's a symptom, as Dave noted earlier, of poor policies that have been implemented.
Unemployment, up or down, or stay the same?
Well, I mean, again, it's going to depend a lot on the decisions that our leaders make. And hopefully we will have leadership at both the state and the federal level that will commit to a pro-jobs, pro-production agenda for America. But, I mean, as Gene correctly noted, the idea of spending additional trillions, thousands of billions of dollars of newly printed money on expanding government at this point in time is really just insane.
All right, we have about a minute left. The economy next year, you optimistic or that's not a great question, but I'm asking it anyway. Optimistic or pessimistic?
Well, kind of optimistic. You had asked about the unemployment rate. I think we'll continue to see the rate go down. I'm concerned about labor participation rate. If we don't get more people back working and address the issues that stop people from working, and there are a myriad of them, then we're going to see this economy basically flatline, I'm afraid.
30 seconds.
Pessimists are only ever pleasantly surprised.
Oh, that's true. But obviously, the economy is critically important. Look, I want to thank both of you for coming in, as you have all year, and good update. All right, we'll see you next week for another edition of Pennsylvania Newsmakers, and as always, stay well.